Is Israel going to strike Iran? And if so, is it going to have U.S. assurances? What's going to happen with the war in Gaza? And are Israeli diplomats safe on U.S. soil? That and more on today's episode of True East. On today's episode of True East, I'm joined by Ambassador Michael Oren to discuss the tragic murder of Yaron Lishinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram, two Israeli embassy aides, and to unpack what might be a turning point in U.S.-Israel relations, from Prime Minister Netanyahu's very candid conversation with President Trump to rising tensions over how to confront Iran. We have to ask the question, is Israel being forced to rethink its alliance with the United States in the face of an emboldened Tehran? Ambassador Oren, thank you so much for joining us on today's True East podcast.
Always a pleasure and an honor to be with you. Doron, my friend.
Absolutely, friend and army buddies, and it's just been a privileged friendship, Michael. So it's so glad to have you here. You know, Michael, the first thing I think is important for us to address, and I know it happened a few days ago, is the embassy murder, the murder of Yaron Lishinsky and Sarah Milgram that took place at that AJC event in D.C. And as the former Israel ambassador to the United States, what if I could just ask, what went through your mind when you heard about that?
First of all, it was truly a tragic incident. I had met Sarah Milgram in the past when I was bringing a delegation of displaced Israelis from the north of the country to Washington. She had a delegation of IDF Pride veterans in Washington, and we worked together. I did not know Mr. Lishinsky well at all, but irrespective, it's a horrible, horrible tragedy. I think that anybody who served in the role of ambassador, this was the ultimate nightmare. The Washington embassy has the lowest level of threat alert of any Israeli emissaries in the world, and any legations. The lowest level of protection. You have security guards and you have personal bodyguards, but they're nothing like they are, for example, in Paris, where during the Christmas break of 10 days and the Parisian police go on vacation, the Israeli ambassador and his staff literally cannot leave their houses. So it's very different in Washington, D.C. Having said that, there are threats. There was an attempted assassination on myself by the Iranians, and you're always getting different levels of threats and warnings. And no embassy and no embassy staff can be completely secured. If someone sees you across the street and recognizes you and charges as you, the chances of a security guard stopping them are not particularly great. So having said that, I don't think there was any fault in the security provisions for this event. For the best of my understanding. What I do feel is immense compassion for the families of the victims and for my colleague, Lehiel Leitner, who is the current ambassador. It must have been truly terrific and horrific and onerous for him. And I wish him full strength to be able to get through this very trying period.
You know, Michael, since this came out and with the horrible killing, there's been interviews with the Israeli diplomatic corps. And I know for me, and I have some friends there, and I friends also when you were ambassador there and afterwards when Ron Dermer was ambassador. And now I'm hearing reports that it's commonplace when they walk out of events, red colored water's being poured on them. And, they're saying this is the blood from kids in Gaza. And I mean, what would you say? I mean, diplomats today, they're probably, after something like this happened, I imagine they're completely shaken up. Does this represent, you think, a fundamental change in the way that diplomats are going to approach their role in the U.S. and other places?
Well, I think that change has already taken place outside of the United States. It's about time it takes place within the United States as well. There have been daily demonstrations in front of the embassy. We actually had an American service person set himself afire and kill himself outside the embassy, self-immolated. So the level of alert has to be raised in the United States as well. That's expensive. Let's be honest with it. The largest single expenditure of the foreign ministry, believe it or not, is not on ambassadors. It's not on public diplomacy. It's on security. It's on security guards. And we're going to have to double that expense and be far more cautious and vigilant.
Let me ask you, American Jews obviously saw this. I spoke to my mom, I spoke to my brother, various people calling me. And it's clear they're, I hear again and again, I don't know if we're safe here. I'm not feeling safe here. I heard this numerous times before this, since October 7th. I mean, do you think they're right? American Jews, are they not safe in America? I mean, how do we answer that kind of reaction?
Well, they're less safe. Let's put it that way. They've been less safe for several years now, certainly since the period of the Tree of Life massacre in Pittsburgh. And that predated the war in Gaza and the Middle East by about 5 years. So it's been a long time. And the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States, though greatly expedited by the war, was sharply on the rise before October 2023. Less safe. There are wonderful organizations that are trying to meet these threats. I know one of them, the Secure Community Network outside of Chicago, in which 95 former FBI and law enforcement officials, vast majority of them are non-Jews, are monitoring and intercepting threats to about 12,500 Jewish institutions across North America. It's very effective. But no shield is impenetrable. And this is what's going to happen, especially when you have individuals who don't have a great track record of anti-Semitic social media or haven't been members of a radical right-wing or left-wing group. It's difficult to track them, that lone wolf. So yes, it is less safe. And I grew up with a lot of anti-Semitism in my working class neighborhood. People used to say, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no anti-Semitism in America. I think you're going to find very few American Jews who say that. And particularly if you're going to be an American Jew on certain campuses today, you're going to encounter a lot of difficulties. I say there are two options. Actually, let me take that back. There are three options. You can hide. You can close your door as an American Jew and lock the door, never go outside, never listen to the radio, never listen to the TV. You can fight back, and American Jews over the last year and a half have learned to fight back. They've fought back truly in a Churchillian sense in the classrooms, in the media, in the courtroom against anti-Semitism. These fights have been, I think, proven relatively effective. Or they can, as you know, move to Israel. That's the third option. Now, strangely enough, as a ardent Zionist, I would prefer the second option because I think Israel has an interest, and a paramount strategic interest, as well as a moral and historical interest in a strong American Jewish community. And I want the American Jewish community to stay and fight.
Since October 7th, when they began to kind of like wake up, and there's almost like a line being drawn in the sand that you're speaking of, what direction you want to take, have you heard from American Jews, or do you feel from American Jews that with the rise of anti-Semitism, this is an opportunity to bring our countries together, like we're both facing a common enemy against Jews? Or is this going to be shaped into the kind of thing like, what do I need this paying Israel for? Life was good before Israel, entered this war on October 7th. They've made my life hell. And is this going to drive the communities apart? How do you see it playing out?
And the answer to both of them is yes. I have members of my own family who say, I feel less secure as an American Jew because of Israel. And I have other members of my family who have rallied to Israel, and I'm not going to let these anti-Semites drive a wedge between us. I think the polls indicate that the American Jewish community is more cohesive and closer to Israel after October 7th than it was before. Let's hope that continues. I hope it continues as within Israel itself, we've become far less united.
I want to take this now into a different direction, which is it still involves American Jewry and Americans in general and Israelis, and focus for a moment on the geopolitical sphere, which President Trump, having returned, I think it was early last week from his trip in the Middle East, from his visit to Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Obviously, Qatar is not just another Gulf state. Qatar is, obviously one of the largest sponsors of terrorism in the world. I mean, they are sponsoring most of the organizations we seem to be fighting against. The money has been flowing through Qatar, Al Jazeera, and so on and so forth. I mean, Qatar was kind of aided and abetted, or at least sheltered the 9/11, many of the people that planned and carried out 9/11. And now, just yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu met with Kristi Noem about Iran. And we hear conversations, as she described it, that this was one of the most frank conversations she ever remembers having between any leader and President Trump, supposedly about Iran. I want to kind of get your take on what do you think is happening in the U.S.-Israel relationship vis-a-vis these two things? Are we looking at a kind of a new era where U.S. interests and Israeli interests are dividing? Can you help us unpack this a little bit?
Well, there's never been an entire confluence of interest between the United States and Israel. Let's be frank. The United States is a very big country. It's far away from the Middle East. It's not threatened with national annihilation like we are. So there really can't be that type of confluence between the United States and a small state situated where we are situated in the Middle East. and confronted with those existential threats. To the degree that we do have these differences, it's I think it's admirable and remarkable that we were able to maintain a certain amount of presence on the same page. For example, both Israel and the United States agree that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, for example. The United States and Israel understand that Israel must stand up to Hamas, and hopefully Hamas will be exiled from the Gaza Strip, and the Gaza Strip will be demilitarized. I think there are points of agreement. Even with the Obama administration, this is going back, you'd think we were at loggerheads over everything. We developed a position paper behind the scenes in which we listed the points on which we agreed on the peace process, which was quite remarkable. And it turns out there were 16 points on that. We couldn't get the Europeans to agree to the 16 points. So the United States and Israel were closer together than either the UN, certainly, or the Europeans. Having said all that, President Trump is a different president. He operates less on the sentimental level, much more on the level of interest, both national economic interest as well as self-interest. He goes to the Gulf on his first foreign tour. He skips over Israel. I would have recommended against that. It's a very problematic message for our neighbors, and certainly during this time of war. But he made that decision. He went to get investment in the American economy, which is certainly his privilege. I think it's probably his duty as president to bolster the American economy, sell arms. That's always good for the American economy as well. And yes, I agree with you, Doron, that I wish he hadn't made the stop in Qatar that he did and endowed them with a certain legitimacy and imprimatur. I wish he hadn't accepted the airplane as a gift. I do. But Qatar is a very complex issue because we have used the Qataris in the past as conduits both for funding Hamas in Gaza, for communicating with Hamas over the hostage issue. So what is Hamas? What is Qatar? It's an enemy country, a friendly country, or is it a frenemy country? I don't think it's a friendly country. And at the same time, this is the same Qatar, as you mentioned, that funds Al Jazeera, which is thoroughly anti-Semitic and anti-American. It's Qatar that spends billions of dollars in the United States to teach American children, American students, to hate their own country. What is this about? Qatar very cleverly plays both sides of the game, but the fact of the matter is the Europeans, the Americans, and to a certain degree, even Israel, we let them play that game. We facilitate that dual game. My preference will be that someday, and someday soon, there will be a comeuppance for Qatar, that this will end. And that a message will be given to Qatar that will be unequivocal. You stop your support for terror. You exile these terrorist leaders from Doha, or you will not be able to do banking in the international markets. We'll close SWIFT to you. We'll close American banks to you. We'll close down the American university branches in your capital, and you will be the pariah. To me, that's an absolutely necessary step for the future.
Well, you know, I want to ask you, what would cause something like that, let's see, to happen? I mean, I appreciate that viewpoint, but seeing, like you said, that he gave them some type of, eminence by visiting them, it seems like he whitewashed a lot of their history, and Israelis are very nervous about that. What would it take for something like that to happen? I mean, there's also a $1 billion deal here, and I think there's concerns, correct me if I'm wrong, that Israel's concerned about its qualitative military edge. I don't know if that's regarding Qatar or only Saudi Arabia. How could this play out that it would require seemingly such a shift for...
It will require a huge shift. I can't tell you how it's going to happen. You need a change of leadership with a different attitude toward Qatar, but it's going to be with us. We have to be sending the message out. The Qatari behavior is unacceptable and has to be responded to, which we haven't done. We have not done. It was Prime Minister Netanyahu said a couple of months ago now that Qatar's not an enemy country. Well, is it or isn't it? And I think we have to make that our message. The message coming out of Zion has to be absolutely clear.
Interesting. From an Israeli and U.S. security point of view regarding Iran, we're hearing it's kind of hard to track the messages. Even before we went on, I had to check the news again just to make sure if anyone else said anything new about Iran, in just the 5 minutes since I last spoke, because it's very hard to follow the messages. The most recent one, again, in the meeting with the Prime Minister yesterday with Homeland Security Secretary, she said, we understand that Israel thinks we cannot trust Iran, and we cannot trust Iran. I mean, those were, I'm quoting her words. I listened to them myself on Fox News, and yet there is this possible deal that President Trump seems to be pushing for with Iran, and yet if we can't trust them under any circumstances, and where does this leave Israel? I mean, do you see a situation where Israel could possibly strike Iran and I'm not looking for you to rub a crystal ball here, but I mean, if we feel it's in our absolute security interests, without the U.S. being, I don't want to say with them being against it, but without them either aiding us in that mission or being fully supportive?
So rub away on the crystal ball. And the answer is unequivocally yes. I could see a situation like that. Frankly, I'd like to see a situation like that. I've long been an advocate of a very robust kinetic policy toward Iran. And I am now. Now, the United States, again, has its own interests. And President Trump is a president who likes to end wars, not begin wars. But again, his country is not in the situation we're in. And there are three possible outcomes to these negotiations. Either the president signs an agreement which is very close, in essence, to the 2015 JCPOA signed by President Trump.
Signed by Obama. Signed by Obama.
I'm sorry, we're going by President Obama.
Yeah.
In which case, Iran, once sanctions are lifted, will once again be enriched. It will probably pay to have its hegemony restored over Syria. It will rebuild Hezbollah. It will rebuild Hamas. And we're going to find ourselves very quickly back where we were on the eve of October 7th, 2023. Or negotiations succeed in dismantling the Iranian nuclear facilities. That's the Israeli version. And Iran is no longer a nuclear threat, and its prestige throughout the region will plummet. The third, and perhaps likeliest scenario, is that these negotiations go nowhere, and that at which point Israel will be given something like a yellow light to act with American backing. I don't know if the Americans themselves would undertake that type of action. And in which case, we must avail ourselves of that opportunity. And there are many questions whether Israel has the capability. We don't have the capability the United States has. We don't have B-1, B-2, B-52 bombers that carry 30,000-pound buster bombs. We have these little planes called F-15s and F-16s and F-35s. But we found in the operation to eliminate Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, who was hiding beneath 60 feet of concrete, that these planes operating in a synchronized way can cut through many, many, many feet of concrete. And so, yes, we have capabilities. Those are only our Air Force capabilities. We have other capabilities. And it is essential that we take our destiny in our hands. It's not just a logo of Zionism. It is a formula for our survival.
Michael, take us back to, if I could ask you, to 1981, to Osirak. It was 1981, if I'm not mistaken. What was that like? I mean, was this a similar situation that Israel was in back then?
It's similar and dissimilar. Okay, the similarities are these. There were two nuclear military programs in the Middle East, one in Iraq and one in Syria. Both of our operations in those cases were preceded by prognostications of disaster. We're going to drive these programs deeply underground. Saddam Hussein and Bashar al-Assad will renew the programs with more vigor. It won't work. In both cases, those naysayers were wrong. Neither program was renewed. They weren't driven further underground. So Israel was 2 for 2. Now, there's no guarantee that would be the case with the Iranian nuclear program, but the empirical evidence is such that it would. That way is similar. What is dissimilar is that the size of the program. Those were pretty much singular facilities. The Iranian nuclear facilities are spread out over large areas. They're numerous. They're underground. They are protected, and they're far away from us. They're 2,000 kilometers away from us. Iraq's much closer. Syria is much, much closer. You could drive to the Syrian nuclear reactor. That's a big difference. And we're going to have to contend with that. We're also have to contend with the international community that's not going to support us. They didn't support us in the past. So these are big differences. We have to proceed on the assumption, the worst case scenario, that the school in Iran that actually wants to create a bomb, because there was another school that didn't want to create a bomb, just wanted to have the ability to create a bomb, has now gained ascendancy because Iran is very weak, and we must act. And by the way, we must act quickly because the Iranians are fervently rebuilding the air defenses that our Air Force destroyed with Russian help. And we can't allow them to do that.
So as this window remains open and Israel considers this, and I'm hearing your reaction, which is, frankly, very uplifting, coming from somebody who's, has been a minister in the government, Israel's ambassador to the U.S. and a renowned historian. You see the grasp, I think, of history so clear. Where does this lead us, Michael, in terms of Israeli foreign policy? Meaning, if we're if we're going to start acting, if there's a trend from what I'm hearing from you, that we're going to start acting more independently in Israel's foreign policy, what does that look like? I mean, right now, Israel's receiving, a decent amount of aid, although it doesn't account for much of our GDP from the U.S. We seem to be asking permission. What does Israeli foreign policy look like economically, militarily, kind of moving forward in this more independent path that you're
well, specifically vis-a-vis the United States, we have to ask ourselves some very hard questions. Are we prepared for every possible scenario? Iranian nuclear deal would be just one of them. Recognition of a Palestinian state could be another. Pressure to end the war in Gaza, yet another. And we have to ask ourselves, which is an even more difficult question, what are we willing to live with and what are we not willing to live with? What are we willing to say, on what issue are we willing to say to the president, we respect you very much, we appreciate everything you've done, but on this issue, we can't concede, we can't yield to your advice or your will. And then we have to ask ourselves the ultimate difficult question is, what price are we willing to pay? And try to anticipate the price. It won't be easy. I am a longtime opponent of the American military aid to Israel. It goes back. I was the only member of the government in 2016 to oppose the President Obama's memorandum of understanding. That's the 10-year, $40 billion package. I opposed it. I opposed it in an article written in Tablet magazine in 2021. It's actually going to be reprinted on my Substack, Clarity, this week. You should read it, because it basically started a whole school of thought that says that Israel should wean itself of American military aid. And most recently, just a few weeks ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu said we have to start weaning ourselves of American military aid. It's an unhealthy situation. It's very advantageous for American arms manufacturers because the $4 billion we get a year is spent in the United States. It's basically a subsidy for the American arms industry. But it comes with an increasingly difficult price for the state of Israel. And so not exactly a prohibitive price, but I don't think it's worthwhile. And I think we should be entering a partnership with the United States. We shouldn't be a recipient of United States aid. We should be in a partnership developing fields that are of mutual interest and need cyber, AI, laser. We could have a lot to contribute there. So that's vis-a-vis the United States. It's more independent, but still, America, there's no substitute for America as our closest ally. We have to maintain open channels to Russia. We have to maintain open channels to China. Because they're both in the Middle East. They're in our backyard, whether we like it or not. And we have to show strength, Doron. The notion that somehow soft power leads to peace is a complete anomaly. The countries that have signed the Abraham Accords with us, they've done so not because they love us. They don't get up in the morning and sing Hatikva. They have made peace with us because we are standing up to their two existential threats, which is Sunni extremism in the form of ISIS, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and Shiite extremism, Iran and Hezbollah. We're the only country fighting both of them. And if we prevail, we will get more peace. And I always have to apologize to the legacy of John Lennon that's saying, sometimes you got to give war a chance. And if you give war a chance, we're going to get more peace. We're certainly going to get more peace.
I want to drill down with you, Michael, just before I let you go into Gaza for a moment. And, let's take almost like a case study example that seems to be playing out. Also, again, Iran might also be playing out in the next few days, but Gaza seems to be playing out today, where Prime Minister Netanyahu said 2 days ago, and has said repeatedly, as has the chief of staff, that Israel is going to occupy all of Gaza, take over all of Gaza, and destroy Hamas, and ensure the military aid is going to reach the Gazan people, because otherwise it will be stolen.
The humanitarian aid.
I'm sorry, pardon me.
3 o'clock.
Exactly. Right. The humanitarian aid, that's right. I wouldn't want that to happen. That humanitarian aid will be reaching the people of Gaza. And we heard yesterday when President Trump was being interviewed, he says, he's hoping for a ceasefire. Those, I believe, are the words he used. And he's hoping it happens as soon as possible. Bring us into kind of, let's go a little bit more granular here. How do these two ideas mesh together? Are they compatible? And again, what do you think Israel should be doing right now?
It is a fine mess. It is a fine mess. Very, very disturbing. The mess exists on several levels. Okay. First of all, the government's position. The government's position is unclear. I don't know if it's clear to you, Doron, but I don't know what we're doing in Gaza. Are we seeking to destroy Hamas? Are we seeking to ratchet up the pressure on Hamas so the released hostages? Are we, as Prime Minister Netanyahu intimated several days ago, are we there to advance President Trump's dream of depopulating Hamas and rebuilding it as a Riviera? Perhaps you have the answer. I do not. And that's very difficult for me because I'm going out to defend Israel every night on the television, and I don't have that answer. And even then, if you say we want to ratchet up pressure on Hamas to release hostages, we know that by ratcheting up pressure on Hamas, they don't always release hostages. Sometimes they shoot the hostages. And what is our priority? You have the army saying the priority is releasing the hostages. You have the government saying the priority is destroying Hamas. So within Israel, we're at loggerheads. And that is an unhealthy situation in and of itself. We have an army that's tired, that's exhausted, and an army shorn of a very clear objective in this battle will become more dispirited and less affected. And then we have the international community, where even friends like Germany now are abandoning us on Gaza, even Germany thinking about taking measures against us, who heard such a thing. And President Trump, who had been very supportive up to several days ago, is now saying that Israel has to think about ending this war. And what does ending the war mean? Ending the war means, frankly, it means at some level Hamas wins. Some level, we were put into a situation on October 7th where we could not reconcile the two goals of the war, which was freeing the hostages and destroying Hamas at the end of the day. And this has been with us since day one, by the way, this contradiction. I've written about it a lot. And now it comes down to the wire. And I have a daughter who says if we don't release the hostages, she's not going to send her kids to the army. I have a son who says if we don't destroy Hamas, we won't have an army to send her kids to. They're both right. And it's all going on inside us all the time. And there's just no quick fix. What would be helpful is if the government had a very clear policy here, because it's very difficult to sell Israel's involvement in Gaza right now if I don't know and you don't know. I'm going to bank on this. Maybe you have the information that I don't have. That what exactly are our goals?
Michael, I want to your clarity and also your clarity in expressing what is not clear. And really, I think you've isolated the variable that if Israel, this is a time leadership needs to stand up and give all of us a clear direction. I certainly feel it. And when you mentioned if it's clear to me, it's clear to me on Thursday, and then it's clear to me on Friday. The problem is Friday and Thursday were two different things that are clear to me. And so, every time you turn on the news, it seems to be clear, but it's always something different that's clear.
Let me, can I put another twist on the clarity?
Yeah, please.
I don't think that Mr. Netanyahu can do this anymore because he has a credibility problem with a large segment of Israeli population, but a different leader could come out and say, I tear my heart out. I tear my hair out. I don't sleep every night over these hostages. I know what it means. But I'm the prime minister, not just of Israel today. I'm the prime minister of Israelis who are going to be living in this country tomorrow. And I know that unless we deal Hamas this fatal blow, that we will be almost certainly losing the lives of many Israelis, whether they'll be attacked by Hamas across the border or by prisoners that we've released from our jail. We know that 80% of them go back and kill Israelis. Israelis will die. And I have responsibility not just to the 20 hostages, which we hope remain alive, but to the thousands of Israelis who won't go back to their homes along the Gaza border, who won't sleep soundly at night. And so please bear with me. I bear all responsibility. This is my decision. It is gruesome. No leader should ever be in this position. And I think if an Israeli leader came out and put it in those terms, Doron, I think the majority of Israelis would support him.
Amazing. Do you feel, did I catch it correctly? Did you say you don't think this prime minister could do this, or you do think it is possible for him to do this?
I do not. Alas, I don't think so. And, I worked many years with Mr. Netanyahu. I have a very high regard for him in many ways. But there's a profound credibility issue here, not the least of which emanates from the refusal of the government to accept responsibility for anything on October 7th or to subject itself to any type of investigation. That is not a tenable position for a number of Israelis. Now, I live in Jaffa, in South Tel Aviv. You don't walk out in the street here and say anything against Netanyahu. But if you go about 300 yards north of here, you're going to find that nobody's saying anything good about Netanyahu. We're very divided over it. We need a leadership that's going to unite us. And here, a point of optimism, and I think a point of poignant optimism, that we are having now some 360 to 400,000 Israelis have served in this war just as reservists, not just as conscripts. That's an immense population. That's the equivalent in America of about 20 million Americans. That's 4 million Americans more than fought in all of World War II. And this is an incredible generation, Doron. You know them. You've been in the Army. I was in the Army last summer. These people have fought beside people from the right, the left, the up, the down, Ashkenazim, Mizrahim, right? Religious and secular. They are intensely patriotic. They are strong. They're steeled. And they're going to come out of this conflict, and they're going to remake this country. They're going to be the leaders of the next couple of decades. And we have the best generation ever. They are our greatest generation. And I'm actually very optimistic about our future.
You know, Michael, from the doors of the embassy to college campuses to Israel and our foreign policy, I think I take a lot from your resolve and your confidence, and it gives me actually a lot of hope. I love everything you've read, and we've been friends for a long time, and I think you're an awesome speaker of clarity. I would encourage our entire audience to look at your Substack, to be following you on X. And do we have another book coming out, Michael? That's what everyone always wants. You've got the best book on Israel. You have the very best book really ever written.
I'm supposed to be really smart, according to you, Doron, but I don't know how smart I am. I signed a contract with New York to write a book about this war.
God. Oh, my God.
Now,
wow.
In which there are two major problems. One is, it's the book not about October 7th, though October 7th, of course, is in the book. There are, of today, at least 170 books just about October 7th. And I don't know how many archives and how many collections. I mean, tens and tens of thousands of documents. That's the least of the problems. The worst problem is we don't know how the war ends. And I'm hoping it ends in the way that I intimated earlier, with Lebanon free and able to make peace with us, Syria under a better government, maybe joining the Abraham Accords, with Iran with maybe a different government, certainly a coward government, peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, peace between Israel and the Sunni world. Everything hangs in the balance right now. And I hope that will be the end of my book.
Well, I'm looking forward to buying it and reading it. We're all going to keep our eyes out for that. Michael, I hope that's the book. Thank you, Dr. Michael, Ambassador Oren, and all of the titles that go with it. At the end of the day,
fellow New York Times bestselling author.
Exactly, exactly. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much for your support and for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you, Don. Bye-bye. Take care.
You too.
Bye.